Hi, welcome to Connecting the Dots, the podcast where we share our stories from the battlefield of consulting. I'm your host, Johnny Hill, and today we have something special for you. A few weeks ago, we gathered together to debate and discuss the pros and cons of generative AI and LLMs from a UX perspective. What started as a formal debate with two sides arguing for or against AI tools fundamentally changing UX quickly transformed into more of a roundtable discussion. Generative AI is an exciting and sometimes scary new development for us as designers, developers, consultants, and just professionals in general. And we've been thinking a lot lately about what role we have to play in this new uncharted frontier. This conversation was originally not intended for public release, but there were so many interesting and worthwhile points that came up that we wanted to share it with you. That being said, some sensitive information has been censored, and there may be times when people are harder to hear or understand since we had such a large group in the room all gathered around just a single microphone. But we did our best to clean up the recording for you to enjoy. Thanks again for joining us today, and I hope you find this episode enlightening and informative. Let's get started.
So you get 5 minutes.
Okay.
And your topic, Gen AI, will change user experience. Don't overthink it. Everything changes, and it's a multimedia chats from here on out. 5
Okay.
minutes.
The multimedia chats from here on out is that one, so I'm not gonna.
Wow. Okay.
I'm getting in Microsoft. Sorry.
Alright.
The fact that we're in this room talking about it means that it already has changed user experience because just about everyone in this room is a user experience professional. And this is all we're talking about, including on sales calls, including at company summits, including on Slack, including drinking at the bar, making fun of stuff. We're always talking about generative AI. Whether we like it or think it's dumb or it doesn't work, doesn't matter because tons of money is getting poured into it in technology, which means it is going to make its way to the user interface, and we are going to have to live with it one way or another. And that's just the way it is. Microsoft is building $100 billion data center just to process ChatGPT. So, I mean, $100 billion means that we're going to live with it in every stupid Microsoft product from now until the rest of our lives. We're right at the precipice of dealing with it in a new way because you can see this in the economics of it right now. You see the tokens dropping and dropping and dropping in price with ChatGPT. It's like, it started off as a few cents and now it's like you can do tons and tons of tokens on like Google, 1 million tokens, which is, like a book basically, for less than a cent. Why are they doing that? Why do you see these economics dropping? It's not just efficiency, it's because they're getting ready for generative video and generative audio and generative like 3D gaming and things like that. So will we be talking to things like instead of typing on our computers next week? No, but everything is going to fundamentally change the way that we interact with it because they're going to generate it. Maybe not because it's good, but because people are lazy and it's efficient and it's cheaper. So my challenge to everyone in this room, everyone in the company is we have to live with it. It could be dystopian and crappy because, again, garbage in, garbage out, and that goes with user experience as well. What we need to do as professionals in the software industry is make sure that we use it for good and democratization of information rather than just creating more crappy interfaces. So I'll leave it to my colleagues to fill in the blanks there.
Sure. I listened to a podcast on the way driving to Summit about this, so I consider myself an expert. No, one thing that stood out to me that I think is interesting from the UX perspective is the notion of dynamic UIs powered by generative AI, and that being like leveraging the AI, not just saying like, oh, just throw a chatbot in it, and then we have AI, but using AI to learn how the users are interacting with the system and dynamically providing information on ways to interact with the system differently. So for example, a novice user that would be overwhelmed by all of the features is kind of ushered in by or through the artificial intelligence into a more streamlined, simple process. And as they learn more and as the AI learns them, the UI becomes more, kind of opens up more. that comes with its own problems of why did you move my cheese? I was used to this option being the only thing I could do. Now there's all this other stuff and I don't want it. So there are UX questions there around how can we make that seamless and easy to understand and not annoying for like, why is everything constantly changing? But there's potential there for learning the user and through that making changes for the user and streamlining processes for them easier as a result of that, just computing power and being able to kind of read the user. There are issues that also come in with that, with like how much data do we have available, is the data inequality, but that's my.
I think I think they coined it hyper personalization.
Yeah.
That's really exciting to me. I think it's really cool. And disclaimer, we hooked them up to Neuralink and we prompt engineered that whole introduction.
This is actually just a persona versus sleeping on the bed.
I'm actually in my bed right now.
So next up, so Gen AI will change user experience very little. Human interaction principles don't change.
I'll read it off then. No, it won't change user experience very much. Because ultimately, and despite everything, the core principles of UX will always remain, always needing to understand user needs. The usability, the intuitive piece of experiences will always be constant. And AI, and I think y'all started to mention it, will augment it rather than replace it. And that ultimately, everything is human-centric. Our principles, empathy, accessibility, and inclusivity are always at the forefront of everything we do, regardless of what AI can try and simulate. It will never understand that. It will never go through the problems that we as people go through. And so relying on that and putting all our eggs in that basket really is not going to change much from there. And nothing can replace human creativity, intuition, emotional intelligence. It has to know the end point in order to create it. So it won't know something that hasn't already been fed into it.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, users do want control on the tool they use, like especially expert users in a domain. They probably may not trust like the chatbot AI completely, and there's definitely like on the UI part, combination of the like chatbot experience with interaction with AI and the traditional interface, right? So like if you want to buy a shoe, there's different ways you can finish that goal. Like either search the shoe or either browse by category and find the shoe. So similarly with the AI, you have different ways to do the task. Either you can interact with the chatbot and getting the task done, or you can still like navigating through the UI and do the task by yourself. The AI can help you to generate an app. There's still a moment like user will not completely rely on the AI. They will like try to navigate through the tab, click the button, and finish the task. Another example is like the Jasper tool, like the tool help you to write the email template. It's just different with a mental model to complete the task, but eventually they still interact with the menu button, those traditional conventional UI elements to finish the task.
See, how can I play both sides here?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that while, a lot of those core human interaction principles will still be in play, and the methodologies for like user research to come to these decisions of what the UX should be in this new world of AI will still be useful. But I know there'll still be a lot of new interfaces or new ways to interact with however we start defining or evolving to define an interface. But there'll be, a lot of, I guess, work put on us in terms of having to figure out ways to build trust with users to use these new ways of interacting. Like, I still use like Siri a lot in my own life, so I'm like very, very timid about like, just like talking out loud to something. But, building trust with users will be extremely important, and also just ways to give them a comfortable level of control, I think, like not forcing all the, like the idea of like a UI being generated for me sounds really interesting, but also maybe hell. If it's not, behaving as I would expect it to be, or, overwhelming me, or just generating a bunch of nonsense. It's not what I asked for, so like I'm just sitting in the middle of this, where I'm like, I agree with points on both sides.
Spoiler alert,
It's
everybody
hard.
is.
So now you rebut, you each have a minute to rebut, but I'm not gonna, I'll.
Okay.
So
Um,
we could just say like, I think they're using chatbot. The world's changing. Everyone wants that.
What did Oscar said it about like no one thinks it's gonna be a game changer, but everyone thinks it's gonna steal their job.
Right.
My time's pressed out, that was a joke. So I think the other team kind of made the argument for us, or at least what I was trying to say, which is like this we're gonna have to live with this stuff because people are lazy. It's gonna be here no matter what. We're gonna have to interact with it. I'm about to receive a graduate degree on the back of ChatGPT, so I can tell you, like, we'll use it, and I don't know what I would have done without it. So I think it's our job, exactly what Juliana and the other team said, like, UX designers are gonna lose their job over this, but we're gonna become much more important because that empathy and understanding good user experience is gonna be key because people are gonna flood the zone with garbage, and we gotta be there to pick up the pieces, and we gotta get out in front of it because it is gonna change stuff. Unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed that already at Summit. Like if you're asking the question, what do you want? Then yeah, the AI can do that for you. But if you're asking the question, wait, what do you really need? Let's get at the root of it. That requires a lot more back and forth, a lot more collaboration. And that's something an AI can maybe help you with, come up with questions, come up with ideas. But if you're trying to outsource that whole process and saying, yeah, the AI is going to make your product for you, you're going to make the beautiful or the ugly wrong thing. Because it might not even get that quite right.
Yeah.
The dog might have 6 legs.
And Danny was right too. I want to say like a chatbot usually is the wrong user experience, and it's going to degrade down to that because.
But it's the easiest way to convince your users that you're using AI.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a little AI. So,
We got to get ahead of that.
but I think we've also seen a lot of people faking AI and saying, "Oh yeah, it's totally doing that behind the scenes." So there's a bit of it. It's a kind of wild west of are people actually using it the way they're saying they're using it, or are they, it's all people in India counting how many muffins you're buying from Whole Foods after the fact. So it's kind of a weird time trying to figure out what are the actual use cases for it, and that's what's exciting and scary about being in the UX space and figuring out like how can we actually leverage this, even if it's not obviously AI under the covers, but it's still helping our users.
So yeah, I'm interested in finding out how we can enhance LLM rather than be solely like I feel like people are like so focused on LLM right now. It's really good at predicting the next letter or the next word to write to try to answer the questions. But the code example, like write me some code. That's so good at doing that. So can we pair it up with other techniques like RAG? I think is another technique that we use, pointed at different data sources and really put the guardrails on to make it good, as a user experience. So.
About the point, like stealing job from like people, about the designer's job, like in the design thinking, we've explored like different AI tools, how to utilize those in our design process. And a lot of time we found that the tool is still crappy at this moment. If we upload a picture of a wireframe and turn it into a hi-fi, it's just a crappy stuff. So I mean, I guess still time for those to evolve to be actually helping us designers at least in the process of design.
But I think it's great. I mean, we feed it some data and maybe get some trends and stuff out of our user research for now, or, maybe help us write some text instead of
And there are tools that are helpful. It may not be the ones that are just like, I'll convert your wireframe sketch to Figma, but the assistance that I have gotten with like organizing thoughts and copywriting, if you need an illustration generated, or there were even folks yesterday with videos that had music composed, right? That's scary, but interesting.
You're talking about how a chatbot is the wrong approach, and Juliana and Danny are sitting there with the knowledge of wanting to put a chatbot AI thing in the app, just use it, throw it at whatever and use it and let's see what sticks. One of the things that they brought up is generative UI, right? So like in Jetpack, you have you're talking to it and then it can show you charts and stuff. But like what is looking at is like, make me a component and put it in the UI.
Yeah.
And so how do we approach that with clients where we're like, we know that you're excited about this, but this is actually more work for us to do than to actually build the thing and design it, because it's going to give us crap and then we have to go fix it, and we also have control over what it gives us.
Yeah.
But it demos well.
It demos fast.
So
It doesn't demo well.
there's a different way to think about it. I think you started to touch on it, which is everyone's like what Scott was saying, FOMO, like we just got to get it in there. The chatbot shows that we're actually talking to the LLM. The real thing is, and what Jetpack is trying to jump onto, is we have a ton of context when that user hits that screen. Now we can't do much with that context, but an LLM can say, we've looked at all these things. We know who this user is. We know what buttons they're clicking on the screen. We know what workflow they want to go do because of the way that they came into the application. Let's set that environment up in a way that gets them a head start on that, so they don't have to click so many buttons. And then as they're working, let's give them a suggestion on what to do next best action. Or, hey, I saw you do those 3 things. You should really think about adding this computed column to this table, because what you're really trying to do is find the best neutral form. I mean, an expert user will know how to do those things, but you can cut out some of the, busy work. And if it's in kind of like a chat type of response, maybe that's the way you want to do it. You want an assistant kind of sitting there suggesting things to you. But I think the wrong way to think about it is you're going to come in with this mental model and just type in, hey, chatbot, I want to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to magically happen. I think we got to shift our thinking a little bit on the UX of it. And it doesn't help that much with linear processes, but non-linear processes, it cuts out some of the busy work. And it helps people kind of fill in those blanks if they don't know where to go next.
Another big component to that too is knowing how the user is feeling going through a flow. That's like one exercise that I know is like a part of the identity thinking toolkit, is analyzing how a user feels at each point in the user flow. And I think when we add like an AI chatbot into it, I almost wonder, which I guess is me posing the question, I'm on one side technically, wondering what the user is thinking, because there's still a lot of evidence that users want to feel heard, and I question whether or not the AI will make them feel heard, since they're talking to something that is already kind of pre-filtered, trying to understand, will they feel heard? Will then them seeing chatbots everywhere make them just feel kind of neutral about the interface? They're not necessarily excited, they're not necessarily feeling anything in particular other than maybe just neutral or numb. So this is a question.
And that gets worse if the AI makes a mistake. It's like, it's not only you don't hear me, you don't understand me. And then I think, this came up, I think, with the other group, like, are you in a situation where like, okay, I'll just have an AI communicate with their AI for me, so that you're getting this, it's the game of telephone continuing. So I think that's another danger to be aware of. It's like, what if the AI does make a mistake, and then how does that affect user trust? Not only with, are you giving me the right answer, but do you even understand what I'm trying to do?
Do you think that technology is going to be used to kind of paper over the cracks of bad UX? I think about, Bloomberg built over hundreds of man years, of interface, and what they've done is, I think they've just put a chatbot on top to help people navigate a crappy interface. We look at this space and UX as one thing, whereas I think there's one side which is how to kind of, interact with data. At the moment, it's through a set of menus, which is quite complicated. And then there's how is the data presented. You don't really want a chatbot to say, hey, this chart looks a little bit like a wiggle with a squiggle at the end. You want to look at the chart. So that's what I like about where Oscar's going with Jetpack, which is it uses composability but essentially you're still using charts and things. So I wonder if UX ultimately will focus more on the presentation of data, as opposed to how you kind of tee up getting that data out.
I wonder too if generating UX or like the tools that we had, I think it maybe goes away from the delightful UX bit. And I think the one interesting thing that we bring to the table as UX designers is bringing in inspiration from other sources. So I think in terms of like creating components, I think there's also a danger of the AI just pulling the most common thing available, the most trendy thing available, and then do you have to then worry about things looking too much like all competitors look the same, and how do you differentiate your product from not only the UX perspective, but maybe from the UI perspective as well?
Yeah, this is kind of what Brandon was saying. It's like, it's not going to invent anything new. It's just going to regurgitate an approximation of what it already knows. So I think a good user experience designer is always going to have the job, at least for the foreseeable future with this technology. But my fear is that when it's just passable enough, people are going to cut costs. And I think that's the danger. And you got to understand where that guy's coming from. He's looking to get the next new hot thing, shove it into a legacy system to pump up the value of it. And that kind of trend is kind of the dark side of a lot of these, of a lot of this technology. And I think like we've got to get in there and make it better, and take principles that we already know and inject them into the newest trends.
So I've got a question on the back of that, which is, as I think about your skills in terms of the way that I've seen you interact with clients and ask them about their journey and what they're trying to, how they want to attract data. In the future, I think it's going to be more about responding to that with prompt engineering and fine-tuning, that chatbot in terms of helping it understand the context of what guide rails, because that's basically, you express that right now in terms of a design and an interface. But I think, is it true to say in the future you'll start to express that in terms of what they call prompt engineering, doing the same thing but verbally as opposed to with an interface?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how different that mental model would be of I'm trying to build a particular data visualization in like Tableau or Power BI, and you gotta like import your data and hook up stuff and turn on the different boxes and levers and stuff versus just shifting to thinking about how you would word your prompt to ask the chatbot to build it for you.
Well, I think a key problem is shifting the responsibility of coming up with the prompt onto the end user, whereas that should not be the end user's responsibility.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like it's user experience in its broadest sense, right?
Yeah, it's figuring out a way to funnel down the user's intent into something that's actionable, and that's what Oscar is implementing.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges of UX that we were talking about yesterday with the mental model, right?
Yeah.
Like right now, that's kind of being ignored because everybody's all, not Xpiro, but it's, everybody's all excited about the prompts and the whatever. But it's a very different thing, especially if we consider our audience, which we need to be domain experts. We got to think about how all this stuff that we're talking about that's wonderful applies to domain experts and what we the people that are so inventive, are going to come up with to try to improve that experience for them, right? So it's trustworthy and all things, right? But it's a very different mental model. And yesterday, I had that simple example of like, edit an email, create an email, right? Your task is then to sit down and do the email. Now, with generative, your task is very different. You have to think about all of the different things you might need to touch in order to get the outcome you want, right? Whether it's checking the right attributes or feeding it, a little bit of direction or guidance or whatever. And how do we have an experience that, it's also on the experience to either send up the right prompts or be dynamic enough to help the user, like we've been talking about with certain guardrails, and then God forbid they stray into the wrong side of the model or something. But really it's a very different mental model to be able to think in terms of outcomes rather than I'm just going to sit down and do a task. And then further with our domain experts, right? They're also going to be thinking in terms of that instinct factor and accuracy, and at least the more experienced people, not like I love Phil's example, the younger developers who might spend days trying to debug crappy code that an expert would catch, in 5 minutes, right? You're going to have a lot of that happen as people age out of the workforce too, that can gut check this stuff and go, well, this is crap. I know this isn't true. So how do I get this thing to give me the outcome I want, right? Because they're going to know.
Right.
And I think that's our challenge and our opportunity here. So I'm straying a little bit from Nate, but I think it's our challenge and our opportunity here, as it's always been. Every time new technology comes in, or whatever it is, right? And we have this focused, still fairly laser focused on that audience, which gives us a lot of power in the market and is unique. And we're, to Chris's point, we're in such a great spot. I mean, every skill that we have at Xpero, but especially UX, we are in rarefied air, like all of you guys in UX, right? Like the people, here's UX, from websites to whatever, and the people that can work on these problems, the people in this room, LLMs aside, is like always been this big, right? And now maybe it's even smaller when you start to layer in AI. So like, giddy up, because we've got the skill that we need to be thinking about this stuff, right? Like, I mean, it's exciting. I don't know. To me, this is like real now. Like, I mean, semi-real, right? It's as real as it ever was. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Like, all this stuff for those of us who've been in it for 25 years plus or whatever. Like, oh my God. Or some of us maybe, 10 years. 10 years.
It's like 5 years ago.
Anyway.
When I was out of college. Just out of college.
Actually, for you keep going back. You probably are 5 years out of college. How many master's degrees have you racked up? At any rate, I think it's a very exciting time, an interesting time, and like let's not be fearful but embrace it. Because there's so many cool things. We're in such a good position to just like think about it, do.
I feel like with you talking about the number of people that can do this kind of thing being small and small, to me it's like it seems like it would be very, very important to have several conversations and sessions around the ethics and how to approach it in the right way, and make sure that if we're the ones doing this for a lot of people and we're the voice of expertise, we need to tell them no. We need to know when it's going down, the dark path of
We need to be those trusted advisors, absolutely, and remind them they are brute force kind of innovation, and their whole thing is to go hard and fast and fail. Actually, running as fast as they can at the brick wall. But that we're going to run into a lot of people like this, and there's a whole continuum of those that are fearful, those that are kind of being pragmatic about it. But there are people that we want to work with. They're the people that advance whatever these things are, and they all have kind of quirky methodologies, but a lot of them they're like, here, like, I want to push because I want you to hit that wall, and then we'll pull back and figure it out. What they don't want is for us to go, oh, well, that's just too hard. That can't be done yet.
I just don't want us to run so fast to prove that we can, to forget if we should, right?
Right.
No. That is a line we should, that we need to raise.
I was going to say, I think that's the point you're raising is how do
Yeah.
we balance that ambition with, hey, this, like, are we considering the ethics of this? Are we considering the fallout of this?
And I just feel like it seems like a very right topic that a lot of people want to talk about, and also that we just should, so that everybody knows, like, okay, this is where we have boundaries. This is where Xpero draws the line.
And what's the context, right? So putting something out in the wild is very different versus like a POC or something that truly is staying with a smaller group, that it's an experiment. Then it's like, okay, the experiment to see, does it go wander into a place where it becomes unethical? And we're like, okay, so it did that. Let's let that get out in the wild, kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of these things at the end of the day are grand experiments too. And as long as we make sure, and that's not everybody's job in this room, a few of us in this room, make sure that it stays in the right kind of framing, whether that's a POC or something that's totally an experiment, whatever. And we're good. I mean, we got to push the envelope a bit with this stuff, but keep in mind that ethics. But how do we define ethical with each kind of thing we're doing?
Well, and there's a larger question around ethics with how the models were themselves generated, and there's all the lawsuits happening to try to determine how you use my copyrighted material without my permission. And I'm like, I'm grateful that's not the kind of problem we're having to solve, but that does bring up the question, like, how do we approach when the model we were using just got pulled because they, for whatever reason. So
or this, like, what happens when it generates something? Ask a lawyer. They'll say, we don't know who owns it.
Right.
Oh, that's so great. It's such a great matter right now.
I talked to an IP attorney, they're like, nobody knows. There's no legal precedent on who owns Generative.
There wasn't precedent on ML. They're so behind. They didn't even get a consensus on that yet. Yeah.
So if you break AI down to like ultimately just what it is, like automation, right? That's really boil it all down. Just us having something do something that for us instead, right? And so I'm thinking like tedious tasks, things that we don't want to do or we can't do at scale, things like that. Like I can't help but think of big design shifts, like even like the BlackBerry to the iPhone, getting rid of the keyboard, or like is it called skeuomorphism, like where stuff used to look like the original thing. So is there like the nuts and bolts question, like is there simple patterns we take for granted clicking around the computer screen that are going to totally go away?
the idea of a menu that drops down to see some other thing. Like maybe that's a task in itself that can be automated, like a similar UI.
Even predicted.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, yeah, you click that, you wanna do this.
Right.
And that's, yeah, I don't know.
The grounds of, like, is there a shift coming in simply in all of UI to where nothing will ever be the same as we know it?
You know, since this first started, I felt that in probably 5 years, we'll all expect not just to be talking to our cars, but talking to our screens. And remember that famous kind of Star Trek episode or movie when they were in the
Computer.
yeah, exactly. You know, he expected to speak to the computer. I think we'll all be doing that really, really soon. We can almost always do it.
And it goes right back to the lesson saying,
Yes.
should we do it?
Thanks for connecting with us today. If you have a complex software problem that needs solving, thoughts on what we discussed today, or ideas on what topics we should tackle next, feel free to reach out to us at podcast@experoinc.com or on Twitter @experoinc. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you next time.